began. And as you enter this space and as people are still trickling in, we'll invite you to just take a deep breath. And today, and for this session in particular, I also want to invite you to really notice how your body feels right now, where you feel your body in your chair or wherever you're sitting, and to really return to that throughout this session as an anchor and as a way to be really present with our speakers and with what you're receiving in being here. And I also am always, we're always really happy to see new faces and new people joining each conversation. So for those who are here for the first time, just offer a little bit of background on centering justice and what this space and community are. So we started centering justice at NU very early in the pandemic, when we made the observation that a lot of decisions that were directly affecting communities of color were being made by white decision makers predominantly. And so we at NU have a really large and beautiful network of leaders of color. And so we wanted to hold this as a space to really center their voices and be led by their wisdom during a time of rapid transformation. And as the series has evolved, it's become a monthly space with a very similar purpose to listen and be led by leaders of color in our community. And each month we sort of intuit a theme that we feel will really speak to what people are needing or wanting to hear about and talk about. And the theme for this session, as you know, is healing justice. And so I'll invite my colleague Yodi to ground us a little bit in our intentions for today.
Thanks, Ananya. Thank you all, especially those of you who keep coming back. In some ways, it feels like this community that we've developed together is a microcosm of what we want to see happening exponentially everywhere. And so when I see your faces month after month, I have this sense of our deeper connectedness. I also just want to thank Ananya, who has been a source of healing for me. Her presence, her way of being in the world, but really her way of being with our team has created this tenderness and this gentleness that we needed, and we really needed it this year. So thank you, Ananya. And I'm excited that she is taking a larger role today to guide us through this conversation. And I can't think of anyone better prepared to guide us in that way. And when I was thinking about this session, I'll be honest, it was, after our session last month where we were talking about democracy. And I think I was mentally preparing myself to need a space of healing based on the election. And it has become so much more than that, y'all. Even that little need that I had has evolved so much more. But a thread with centering justice has been sort of how this nonprofit industrial complex, how grind culture contribute to our personal and organizational burnout. So many of us, and I count myself among the us, are serving often from an empty cup. There's this kind of culture of scarcity and lack, And I know Bridget is with us, and she gave me the language of attending to, like, so much of our work is attending to the downstream impact of racism, poverty, and trauma. And the impacts of that and the grind culture on our souls and our personhood is so dramatic. I mean, this weekend, and who knows what I was thinking, but I watched Just Mercy. And if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to watch it. It's the story of Brian Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative. But at the end, y'all, I found myself just sobbing and realizing that what I had been holding and am holding. And I gotta, like, keep going, right? And I noticed that we keep thinking and doing and acting and moving, and it's really hard to slow down, especially in our work, to nurture those wounded parts and to notice our bodies or to name the need for healing. And our culture really reinforces, you know, we're in our heads a lot. We're such a cerebral culture, and at least for me, if I'm not attentive, there becomes this disconnect from my body. I mean, literally, my body has been aching as I sit at this computer and in a chair hours and hours, day in and day out. And so when I was envisioning the session and needing a space for healing together, I since then, it's just become clear to me that the conversation is so much more expansive. And because we are all universally and energetically connected, as I was thinking that, Kiana, one of our speakers, reached out to me. She's a faith leader in the UU church, and she was lamenting how we so often exclude or faith and spirituality and belief. And I am not talking about religion, but faith and spirituality and belief are often an afterthought in movement work and in our organizations. And so she really was the inspiration in some ways for the use of the word healing and tying that to justice. But it's important to acknowledge that there is an actual movement of healing justice. So there are the terms and there's the movement. And the movement was first coined by the Atlanta-based Kindred Southern Healing Justice Collective. And they came together after the deplorable impacts on Black and Brown communities following Katrina and Rita. The movement began to address the widespread generational trauma from systemic violence and oppression. And it revived really our leaning upon ancestral healing practices and building new and more inclusive ones. And that movement today, which I draw inspiration from, includes a network of practitioners, organizations, activists, artists, educators, religious and faith leaders. And the idea in that movement is to reimagine wellness for the collective. It is why we need more walks with friends and not more bath time. I'll tell you some other time about my therapist saying, well, maybe you take a bath. And I'm like, girl, ain't nobody got time for that. That's not self-care for me. So today is about honoring that we can only pour from our overflow. And I want today for us to learn and hear and be inspired by the cup filling practices that our guests are going to offer us. And I hope that it inspires new ways of being in our work and in our lives. And that work, as you'll hear today, is personal. And in a movement like Healing Justice, it's collective. And in both of those spaces, it is each of us nurturing and healing ourselves in the way that we need, so that we can join together collectively to envision a transformed and new world. And we cannot do that if we are not attending and naming the harm of white supremacy and dominant culture on all of us. So it's an invitation. Where does healing what does healing offer us in our work and in our practices and in our narratives, in our ways of being, and how can we integrate that in our organizing and our planning? If we're going to dismantle racism and other forms of oppression, if we're going to get set free, we're going to need to do regularly on our own and as a group, much of what you'll be invited into today. And so before I turn it back over to Ananya, I just want to note and acknowledge my dear friend, Julie Quiros, and my untold stories of liberation and love siblings, Kiana, one of our other speakers, and Mishelle too, are a part of that group, who really helped to reignite my love of writing, which I find healing. I just love and appreciate so much what Julie brought for women of color, and not just Julie, all of the folks who organized that through the Untold Stories work. And in a little like shameless plug, I'm gonna share with you an email I wrote yesterday, a writing that I offered yesterday in our newsletter on gratitude, and how that is also a radical form of self-care and well-being and self-preservation. So I put that in the link for you. Thank you all again for being here. And Ananya, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Yodi. So we always want to make this a space where our speakers can bring their whole selves and express that through this conversation. So in that spirit, we'll begin by asking each of our speakers, beginning with Kiana, what communities and identities you're drawing upon as you enter this conversation.
First, I want to just thank New and the staff as a whole, because I know that you all function as a whole. You have individual roles, but you are a collective of folks who are moving work forward. So I want to just acknowledge you all. And I'm doing speaker view, so I'm hoping that you're doing speaker view. I can tell you my identities, but I need to do something that's important to me. In my community, we light chalices as a way to call ourselves and to be present in the conversation. So I'm not, but I work a lot with kids and not a lot of fire. So the way that we usually do this is simply, I say, I'm just gonna do it with you all, but you're gonna do it with me, right? You're tracking. If you have a chalice in your hand, your head, or your heart, and if you have elders and ancestors who are with you, they're with all of us right now. And so I call that energy and that love into this space before we start. I am a queer, Black, polyamorous woman, and I'm a fierce mama bear of 2 preteens who give me a run for their money. And I bring my Black Unitarian Universalist faith into the space today. And I also bring a little bit of East African worship and altar worship with me. I went to go get my little twigs, which helped me because they're right here. And this other bag full of sage and feathers came with it. So it's supposed to be here. And I bring all of that with me. All of that, there's 3,000 ancestors behind me. So if you can see them wave, they see you.
Thank you for that beautiful invitation, Kiana. Yoshimi, would you like to share about the communities and identities that are present for you?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Yoshimi. I'm sorry if I take a minute sometimes. I'm still recovering from some sickness. And so I'm going to do my best. But again, my name is Yoshimi. Yodi, Ananya, you all, thank you so much for letting me be here and take part of this. The communities and identities that I draw off of, well, first and foremost, I am the daughter of a Marshallese immigrant who is a super mom. She was a stay-at-home mom, and she took care of us and taught me all the things that I needed to know as a woman. And so I give all my thanks to my mom. And then my dad is a wonderful Black American Showtime band director. And so I come from 2 very rich cultures. And I've always just have always had that behind me. And so I grew up in a family of musicians. all my brothers do some kind of healing through music work, and it's just kind of been a family thing. And so healing for me, I've always drawn upon music and dance. And so I've been in many dance communities, many music communities. And so that's where I draw everything on of who I am today. So yeah, thank you.
Beautiful, Yoshimi, thank you. How about you, Mishelle?
Hi, I am Mishelle Rodriguez, and where do I start? A lot of people don't know my full name is actually Rosie Mishelle Rodriguez, and my namesake is my great grandmother, who I call Mama Rosie. And so I'm from Southern California, from Los Angeles, and it's interesting to be from a much warmer place. But I love how Kiana came in, and my great grandmother's house is on 107th Street, around the corner from Watts, and I feel very close to her in this moment. My mom, Shelley Norman, was a single mom and loved writing and was deeply empathic, and I feel like I get so much of myself from her. I am a cisgender, straight Black woman, 2 little boys, who keep me very busy as I'm now doing therapy work from home with them. And I bring my identity as a counseling psychologist to this setting, but as a woman who is learning from other Black women, helping other Black women as I'm figuring it all out, being married, being partnered, being a new business owner. And so just the healing while helping other people heal and figure it all out together is what I bring here today.
Thank you so much. One thing that surfaced when we were planning for this conversation is the largeness of what healing and healing justice and healing injustice can mean. And as Yodit mentioned, Kiana, you were a big inspiration for this conversation. And so we wanted to just begin by offering each of you a chance to share how you feel called into this conversation and what healing means for you and to you.
Did you want me to go first, Amanya? Okay, I just wanted to be sure I wasn't stepping on anyone's toes. Healing for me, I mean, one, you're right. This conversation became massive and expansive. And what a beautiful thing to not be in a place of lack, but in a place of abundance. Like, how do we cap this and control this in a way that's manageable, right? So it's a good place to be when we're talking about healing, that we have so much we don't know what to do. And for me, I really started to sit down and think about what is healing for me. And it's really become about addressing discomfort. If there is discomfort in my sleep pattern, what am I going to do to remedy that? If there is discomfort in how my body is feeling, how am I going to remedy that? If there is discomfort in how I'm connecting and being in relationship to the people that I love, I want to address that. And so for me, healing really is about finding how I can be whole again, but it also requires that I acknowledge in the places where I'm not whole. And so it is about being present. It's about being in relationship with myself, with my community, with the things that I love, in a way that, and to set it up in a way that allows for healing. And to constantly check myself, check other folks, and check in with other folks on a very regular basis. Are we okay? Are we all right? What do you need? How can we get to our best selves all the time? So that for me is how I look at healing.
Thank you, Kiana. And there were also some really beautiful thoughts you shared about the role of faith.
For me, yeah. So at the end of the last conversation, we talked about democracy, y'all, and it was a beautiful conversation. But I know as a Black person, a lot of our political history is tied to what faith community you're a part of, what building you go to, who your minister is. And we weren't talking about any of that. And it kind of caught me. And in addition to that, we had done a part of another community that's a part of New Champions for Change. We had done a tour of the community in Ypsilanti in particular, and we were standing on this corner and you had the lodge in two different churches, and I'm pretty sure there was probably a third church. And to be standing there and to not maybe unpack some of the role that faith communities had in supporting Brown folks as they came from the South to the North, to not speak to that, to not draw that out felt really weird to me. To not talk about how churches can't be voting places, or they can, it depends, you know, all of those things. Yes, South Adams and Buffalo. So for me, it was like, when are we gonna talk into it and not around it? That's where we started. That's not where we arrived, and that's okay. But it definitely was this impetus to me to think, okay, I'm visiting all of these churches that helped create Black and Brown community in Ypsilanti and Ann Arbor, but we're not talking about faith. And it just felt like a disconnect. And that disconnect, I reached out to Yodit to heal that disconnect, to soothe that discomfort I had. So that's where I started, and look where we are.
Looked like Yodit wanted to chime in there. Did you?
Just to like honor that so much of social organizing historically was birthed in the basements of churches, right? And that church and faith have also been weaponized, right? And so it's a healing and growth edge for us. And I thought that your kind of naming the ways in which, at least in the context of like our work conversations, that is largely absent. I thought that was important, and that it was, you surfaced something that was tender too, right? How do we, and you know, I think just a final thought, like I hold a lot of fidelity. This is being in an organization, but I hold a lot of fidelity to mission alignment. And so part of what you were surfacing, both, we have managed to create a space where we can talk about really difficult things, and I felt ill prepared as new and as an organization to hold that container around faith, which is so important. And I know you're gonna help our community move forward in that way. It was so good that you surfaced it, and I appreciate that.
Mishelle and Yoshimi, we'd like to offer the same invitation to you to just speak to how you feel called into this conversation about healing. Maybe beginning with Mishelle, sure.
So I think part of where I enter it is feeling a huge responsibility as somebody who works in the mental health field. I think we live in such a culture of categories and hierarchies. And I think that a lot of our systems set mental health up as like the place for healing without acknowledging how white supremacy was built into it, without acknowledging who made the theories, who was studied, who they applied to, who they don't work for. And so I think that I saw in my own personal healing journey, I went to school at UCLA, that was my dream. I grew up wanting to like live the Cosby Show life, and like that was health. Realizing how much respectability politics was built into that, realizing how much harm that did to myself and to others. And so finding my own health and healing has been so much unlearning, so much questioning, so much reclaiming the parts of myself and putting them back together. And so all of that affects how I define healing. I'll tell you a little bit. For me, it means healing is getting to be our full self and getting to do that enveloped in community that is thriving. And we know that because of white supremacy, because of systemic oppression, there's so many forces that keep that from happening. But while we're trying to like to resist and to change those, we have to kind of reclaim and recreate practices that help us be whole while we are in this and while we move to something new. And so a lot of times a metaphor that comes to me that has helped me a lot in thinking about it is like the image of a tree. And so thinking about how do I, with whatever the thing is that I'm working on in myself or with other people, how do I expand down into my root system, which is like my community, my ancestors, sometimes that's a spirituality, a faith. How do I draw from those things? And one thing I learned a couple of years back is that trees' roots are interconnected and they get through winters by sharing resources. And so I feel like we are about to enter into a really hard winter. And so healing is about that interconnectedness and that digging down into each other in our root system. And then the trunk being like our bodies. How do I get settled in my body? How do I find energy and listen to the wisdom in there? How do I take care of it? How do I notice the feeling of the trauma in it and move that through me? And like, what are the processes for that all the time? And then I think about the trees and the leaves, and it makes me think about our vision, our values, again, spirituality, if they're our North Star, like where am I going and where am I reaching for? And so there's this idea of, with the roots going back 7 generations, with the branches going forward 7 generations, and that healing has to be big enough for all of that. And that means that mental health providers have to get real different in how we work, and decolonize a lot of that, question everything and retool. But also we have to really expand, like churches are not the monopoly on healing, mental health is not the monopoly on healing, that for us to heal, we need so much, we need all of us.
Yeah, and what a beautiful thing to also offer to this community, in the spirit of interconnectedness and collective healing. So thank you. Yoshimi, would you like to add to that?
Yeah. So, sorry. Okay. So how I felt called into this conversation. As I mentioned before, I come from 2 very rich cultures, but I also come from very old school ways of thinking. And so in an indigenous island family and in a old school Black family, whenever you felt some type of way, it was, no, you'll be fine. And like everything was just kind of glossed over and it wasn't ever really addressed. If you felt some sort of way about how your parents dealt with the situation, you don't say anything, and it was always, it's because I said so, and this is the rules of the house. And so coming from that, I feel like as though healing has always been a lifelong journey for me, and that I've always looked at how can I can't help anyone else until I help myself. And so like how Yodi was saying earlier, we're always going and going and going and trying to give from these like half empty cups instead of thinking of half full, and then just filling ourselves up to where we're able to give from that overflow instead of just or giving from not enough of ourselves or not having enough of ourselves. So alongside that, I was never the type of sit down and meditate kind of girl. Like I lived in Ann Arbor majority of my life. So, we have our little hippie population. And so I've done it all. I've done dance church and like went to many different things. And so I looked at how a lot of people just what's the word? They put out healing, like you have to meditate, you have to sit and do this. You have like, it's very structured, even though it's not supposed to be. And what I notice is that healing is different for everyone. And going from a larger spectrum, I feel as though movement is a very large part of that. We don't move as a nation anymore. We don't dance how we used to. Everything goes back to the drum. I even had like this very beautiful experience where I was with all of these West African dancers, many of them white women. And so we were out in the Diag area dancing. And then we had these younger Black women come up to us, or they came up to one of the older white women. They're like, why are y'all perpetrating and like doing all this? And the older white woman who has lived in Africa, like so many years, her whole entire family is, and so I look at people from where they come from with their heart space. And so I respected that about her, which is why I felt comfortable in that space. And she told the girl, she was like, well, we all come from the drum. The drum is a heartbeat. And then they were like, okay, I get it. So just seeing that, that bring together two communities or two ways of life and thinking also helped me realize, like, yeah, we do come from the drum, and we don't dance anymore like we used to. We don't have community like we used to. And community and dance is how so many cultures have healed within themselves, and like healed as a community or as a tribe or as a village. Like, you have your times, even in my mom's culture, we have our days where we would get together and everyone would just kind of release and let go. It was that active release and letting those feelings. At funerals, people would dance. And, you know, because instead of staying stagnant and keeping all those emotions, thought processes, and everything inside of our bodies, it was a way to let go, using the voice and letting that be a release. And so I wanted to look at, yes, Yodi, colonize healing. Yeah. I wanted to decolonize healing and, you know, and look at it from a different way, and go through what the different processes were for my ancestors and bringing that to the community. And I had another, oh yeah, just looking at healing from a different perspective and using all the senses as well. And so foods that my ancestors used to eat actually were like really helpful in my healing journey, just to like feel connected and going into things with intention, drinking my water with intention and knowing that it came from all these, water's been here for however long. Yes. So, you know, just going into things with different intention, because so many of us are healing on our own now, especially now where we're all in isolation pretty much. We have these practical tools at our hands, but we're just not given them. We're only told it's this way, this way, this way. So I just wanted to show different perspectives on that. Sorry if that was too long.
And that's a perfect segue to this next part of our conversation, which really invites each of you to share some of those healing practices that you have. And I think as we do that, I also want to bring us back to centering justice and to that as our reason for being here. And as each of you has hinted at in the ways that you come into this conversation about healing, that when we talk about healing justice, we're talking about healing from the impact of white supremacy. And so with that in mind, maybe we could actually begin with you, Yoshimi, if you could share some of the healing practices that you feel will and must transform us as we move toward a future that centers racial justice.
Yeah, definitely. So going back to the self-care, it all starts with self. And Yodi, you brought up a really good a good thing that I wanted to speak on, how she was like, we ain't got time for a bath. So, but you have time for a shower. So what I like to do, especially in the mornings when I take a shower, I have a little ritual. So when the water is coming down, sometimes I will just imagine that it's washing away, and I can just feel it washing away the things that I've brought into it all the dirt, not just all the dirt, but all the other kind of dirt, all the things that I just want to let go, and just using it as a way of intentionally seeing my problems go away. Not necessarily go away, because they never go away. And if they do, it's just like able to handle a little bit better. So some other practices that I do as far as coming from the South, because that's just my thing. We can't help anyone else till we help ourselves. So one thing is to do shadow work. And many people have different definitions of what shadow work is for them. For me, I like to think of things very practical, very simple, so that I can recognize the triggers. That's my definition of shadow work, is recognizing the triggers, so that when they do come up, it might be a little bit easier next time to sit with myself and say, hey, I'm feeling some sort of way. Why do I feel that way? And even if you don't have the time, another thing that I practice is setting a timer for myself, especially as a mom of two, currently have one baking in the oven. And working full time and just doing all of my side stuff, finding time to feel and really sit in those feelings is important for me in order to heal them, and in order for me to address what's going on. So I will literally set a timer. I went through a very rough relationship, well, a couple of relationships. I've had some physically violent relationships where I had to really sit in myself and understand why I was letting this person treat me this way. And so I would set a timer for when I knew I would have time. So it'd be like 15 minutes. Okay, I'm going to give myself 15 minutes or even 5 minutes of just feeling sad, feeling angry, feeling all the things that I needed to do in order for them to release. Because when I was around said person, I would keep it all in. And this also happens in daily life. You know, we deal with bosses we don't like, or with people who have different belief systems than us. And, you know, at that moment, you can recognize that trigger, you can come back to it and say, okay, this is how I felt and whatnot. Another thing, when it was too much for me, I would write a letter. So I've written so many letters throughout my life. First one was with my mom. I never gave these people letters, but I would always just write down, this is what happened, this is how you made me feel, this is how I've dealt with it, this is how it's affected me in my life and my relationships with people, this is what I think you could have done better. Like, just letting it all out and being able to see it outside of myself and outside of just keeping it all in. And so writing letters was a huge thing. Setting a timer, writing a letter, feeling the feelings. Another is just to use movement, use dance, use sound. We let our body, I feel, is another form of the mind. We have our brain up here, but our body also tells us, it gives us these signals. And I feel, especially with people of color, I call them our spidey senses. I talked about this the other day. We all have these spidey senses, and a lot of society has told us to turn them off. It's like, no, you can't feel that way. Oh, you can't feel that way. And so we don't set these healthy boundaries anymore. People have issues with setting healthy boundaries now. And so being able to know, like, no, I do feel a certain way about that, and I am going to speak on it, or I am going to let it go. Just being able to feel and be connected to your body. And so I feel as though movement helps that. Dance, even just like I did capoeira for a lot of years. And so just doing any kind of movement to help those feelings move around. And for me, it's either to release and let go, or it's to feel more deeply. So even sometimes when I have that timer on, I'll go sit with a really, really sad song, because I feel like we've all done it. We've had a breakup, you know, you listen to a song and you just start crying. Crying is a release, and so is dance. And so listening to that music, feeling it in my body and just kind of letting it all flow through, and then crying and letting it all out is a huge thing for me. And I feel like people judge themselves. And so I learned how to be patient with myself and not judge myself. Because even when I first started out doing that, I'd feel like someone was looking at me through the window, and I'd be like, no, I can't really move that way. Or like, you know, and so just being able to be judgment free with myself and let myself move just really helped. And this is what I also do outside of my regular job, is workshops with women to connect with their womb center, you know, because I feel as though that's our power center. And we've lost that connection with our spidey senses being cut off, and with everything else. And we're taught that we're lower, and society has, especially as a woman of color, it's been a rough go. And so being able to decolonize my thinking and how I heal is a huge part of healing. And so those are practical tools that I use to do. And I usually will offer them to my clients, like write a letter and I'll put down the prompts and different things. But yeah, that's kind of where I bring that in.
Thanks, Yoshimi.
Mm-hmm.
Quiana, I saw you really expressing something as you were listening.
No, I just I love to talk about physical movement. Like there's something about that when Yoshimi's sharing, I can not only hear her words, but I can also feel what I know movement does to me. You are, Yoshimi, very expressive when you talk with your hands and your body, but what you're saying is vibrating literally. And so I have a visceral physical response to the joy and the truth that you're presenting. So that's the response is from is to Yoshimi about Yoshimi.
Quiana, would you like to share?
Yeah, I joke that I'm polyamorous in a bunch of ways, and one of them is how I take care of myself. There isn't one particular thing. Relationship is everything to me. So I really look at all of my relationships on a very regular basis and try to heal those. I walk. I try to cultivate community with other Black women. I attend a physical brick and mortar online church, because we're not online, because we're online now, faith community that has a worship service. I use music, I use dance, I use laughter. I also know how to numb. I mean, sometimes what I need, the healing I need is not a healing, it is a moment to pause. So I drink beer, I drink wine, sangria. And so I think I don't like having a single source or only one way that I'm going to get healed. Like that for me is like, that's not going to work. That's not going to work because all of my harms don't look the same. All of my healing can't look the same, right? Stubbing my toe on the corner of my bed doesn't require the same amount of energy as somebody at work wanting to touch my hair, right? So like, I saw Yodit's face, but it's a different harm. So it's a different point of healing. And so I really try to match the harm or the discomfort with the healing method. And I find that to be super important and proportional, right? Like if you and I, Yodit, for example, have a disagreement, I'm going to come back and talk to you. I'm not going to post it on Facebook and cuss you out and do all of these things and have to come back to the table and be like, oh, you just meant that? Oh, my bad. So really trying to be present in my life and really consider all of my options. And lately, some of the things I've been doing, walking is definitely one of them. Advocating for other people. I have a friend who likes to walk with me, but they need access to a bathroom. And so we both wrote the Ann Arbor Parks and said, you know about that girl truck life, and Ann Arbor Parks and said, what's plowed in the winter? What bathrooms do you leave open? So now I have that for her so she can go walk and be in her community. So advocating for Black women is something huge that I do, looking out for folks. This comes back around to Mishelle in a really funny way. I happen to use her services in another capacity. And for whatever reason, all of my therapy fees were waived from now to the end of December. So I've literally been turning all of my fees into money for trans Black women who need support. And so it's all of the way, and that's healing for me, right? Like I didn't always get to have therapy, but now I do, and now it's free for a hot second. Okay, girlfriend, don't mess this up. You know what I mean? My ancestors, these 3,000 folks behind me do not play. And so I'm called to do that. I'm called to put money in the hands of folks who need it the most when I am in overflow, right? So I guess and I also think about things in a very layered way. I personally, the ways that I need to heal look a lot like being with family, having a faith experience, shared music experiences. When the music come on and we be all drag queen facing all up on this Zoom, that's the smack. That is like, give me that all day. But I also do the community things I talked about, the work that I do with Black Lives Unitarian Universalists. We held a Juneteenth. We're about to plan Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa about to pop in. We did something for election night called We Got Us, where we literally built a house, right? It was like, come to the porch and hear grandma speak, or you want to go in the basement and talk politics, you want to be in the front living room. So really trying to utilize the tools we have, which are Zoom and distancing, and still make what we need to survive this. And then I do some things on a systemic level. And so I guess for me, I'm looking at it in like, how do I personally heal? How do I help my community heal? How do I address systemic harm? Because all of it has to happen in me, right? Like it's all happening in me, and it has to happen in me for revolution to happen. So I just want to leave you with that. But like, find the things, find your lane, find the things that bring you joy, do them a lot, do them all the time, and find ways to be, I don't, how do I say this? Letting joy in and letting excellence in doesn't mean you're always happy. I'm not a positive vibes only person. I am a full span of humanity, and sometimes letting the joy in is realizing I've messed up. I've messed up. I've been less than who I want to be as a human out in the world. And letting the light in is acknowledging that and being humble to that. And it's not a positive vibe only kind of mantra, right? And so really for me, healing and how I daily practice it is just being present, to not deny myself happiness, and to honor that I am a full spectrum human, and I'm probably going to feel a full spectrum of stuff, and to have places to come back to it and say, that's okay, we'll try again tomorrow.
Kiana,
I dropped, just saying.
You had shared that in the context of how you navigate your relationships in a way that felt really impactful to me. I wonder if you'd share that.
So was it the story about my babies?
Yeah, I think there were other stories you shared too.
So yeah, I mean, so for me, I constantly is scanning my relationships. So to get through COVID and life, we my co-parent has my kids, has the kids. They're their own kids at this point. They're 12 and 10. We're just Uber and Kroger runs at this point. So they are with him, Monday through Friday, and then they're with me every weekend. And usually on Saturday, as we're about to do that last hour together, we like scan our lives. I scan what we've done over the weekend, and I say, did you have a good visit? Was there things I could have done better? On a very regular basis, I say to my kids, and each one of them so different. I'll be like, hey, am I a cool mom who kind of gets mad sometimes, or am I always mad and I have cool moments? And they'll answer me honestly, because we've set up a dynamic where they can let me know what's going on. One time, this is like 3 years ago, I thought I was being private on the phone, but that in a house, whatever. So my daughter heard me, say I was flustered with her. When I came out the bathroom, I couldn't find her, and she was hiding in my closet. And I realized I had hurt her, that what I had said on the phone really hurt her feelings. And so I sat down on the floor and I said, hey, tell me what you felt. And we went through several steps in conversation, and I apologized to her and acknowledged the harm I did. And we didn't hug for a while because hugging is our way of closing out harm. But when she was ready, she kind of gets close and, okay, you can hug me now. But just that act of role modeling for them what repair looks like, role modeling for them what it means to not discount who they are and how they feel, to honor their humanity means I can honor my own humanity, because our humanity is connected, right? Because if I can't see the God in her, I sure can't see the God in me. This is what I believe. And so when I honor the God in her, it honors the God in me. And then when she goes out in the world and somebody doesn't honor who she knows to be her truest self, she can speak up and be like, hold up. So for me, it is this living what I want to experience out in the world and starting that in my home. I am their primary role model for faith. So we light chalices. We talk about, what do you think about Jesus? What do you think about heaven? What do you think about church? What don't you like? What do you like? I give them space to be their full growing little selves. Now, I don't always like it when I want them to come get me the remote and they have this autonomy and they be like, no. I'm like, man, but there is beauty in growing them into being their own self and being able to use logic and healing and their resources and their words to get their needs met.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Quiana. Mishelle, we're really curious about what this is sparking for you.
So much. So I'm going to try and stay concise. I resonate so much with what Quiana was saying, in that but the healing is so interconnected. Trying to figure out how to parent two little boys to be whole in the world and whoever they want to be gives me daily challenges around finding what I got to work on in me, trying to figure out with a partner who I've been with for 20 years, what works in gender norms and what doesn't, and what needs to heal, and what trauma from all of the two families that we bring together need to heal. There's just the work that I'm doing on myself and then in my close relationships is part of what makes the bigger systemic and the movements that we're doing work or not work. And so we don't get to, we gotta have to show up for all of it, or it shows up for us and we get to choose whether we lean in or not. I think that's a big part of it. I wanted to jump back to kind of something Yodika said in a little bit of the chat and the conversation about self-care, because I think that for me, part of healing with a lot of things is looking at something up close, looking at what came before it, and then figuring out how I remix it and freestyle it to make it work for me. And so I love Maya Angelou's quote about how, we must withdraw from the cares that will not withdraw from us, and it gives me permission to pause when it feels like everything is on fire and that I can't. And, I feel like if Maya says I must, then that's what what I need to do, or I think about, we all know Audre Lorde talking about self-care as resistance and self-preservation, but that came before the co-opting. So I can go back to that and I can trust that and I can lean into that. And I can figure out what that looks like for me, and I can change it as many times as I need to. But I love that, putting butters on my body can be a whole meditation. That, like Yoshimi said, eating a meal can be a whole meditation. It doesn't have to look like what it looks like for anybody else. And so reclaiming it for myself and letting it be a time to slow down, to refuel, to get in my body, to love my body in behavior, has been a really important thing for me. I'll share a couple examples that I've had during COVID that have been really helpful, because if we didn't know before this that white supremacy and systemic oppression and hate and all of that have a charge, I think we all know that in our bodies right now. I think we know how we've been holding our breath through some of these moments, and then our immune system gives out and all of that. And so one thing that has been such a source for healing is at the very beginning of this, there was a group of local women who came together to do a sister circle monthly. And so it was community, it was interconnected, and it was prioritizing ourselves and each other, and holding space for each other in a regular way, come what may, with 2020 and everything it was throwing at us. And there was one month in particular where not a lot of people showed up, and everybody in there leads and shows up for community in such amazing ways. And it was a morning where we just shared about the pain and the longings in all of this. And in that space, I let people into my home and things that were happening inside of me in a way that I hadn't in other spaces. And it was amazing to sit in a circle and there not need to be an expert, not need to be any answers. But I left there like having metabolized pain. Like I think a lot of what we're holding sometimes is collective trauma, and that needs to be healed and collective. It never, too many of us are holding it alone. And I think that that's part of the problem. I mean, there's been other months where we talked about like what does freedom look like and taste like and feel like and sound like, so there's that. I agree with Kiana was saying too. It's not always happy. We don't have to force or manufacture that to heal and to move through things and to create something different. Another example, actually, wait, let me say one more thing about that. I think that truth is so important. That I've been all in Girl Trek. Girl Trek is amazing, but like we want to speak truth to power, and that's real. But like in our quiet moments alone, are we being true, telling the truth to ourselves about what we're really feeling, about what really pains us, about where we are, messy and needed to work on it a little bit. But I had an interaction after the sister circle where somebody followed up with me and asked me to really lean in and like, why did it take that to let somebody behind the curtain? And why don't I do that more often? And why don't I trust it? And so just those relationships and telling the truth in to ourselves and in our communities, I think is such an important part of the healing. One thing I think that's happening a lot more that I'm means a lot to me is healers healing together. So there's a lot of Black mental health professionals and healers who are getting together to do trainings like EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or brain spotting. And so as everything was happening in Kenosha, Wisconsin, I was at a training that was all BIPOC. And it's weird to be at a training about dealing with trauma while feeling all of the trauma and having all of that in the room with BIPOC people, but giving ourselves permission to throw the agenda away and say, like, can we just be with what's here? Can we move this? Can we support each other? And I think the second day of it, like the first day we did that, and it was like, okay, we still got through the stuff that needed to get done. But the second day, I think it was the morning that I woke up and found out that Chadwick Boseman had died. And that hit me in a way that I just could not even account for. But in that space, and I think this is an invitation to all of our systems to, as we are all showing up and healing people, to make space to heal, to be willing to throw the agenda away, because we know that what is happening in that moment is the most important thing. And for me to be willing to do that in my own house, like if I need to reschedule clients, if I need to, but the dishes don't have to get done, that in the moment, what needs to be being together and moving through the stuff in our body and being connected is most important, and giving ourselves permission for that, I think, is a huge part of what I've found to be healing. And I think that for me, I love arts a lot. Using Black art and pop culture. There's been times where, and I think where I really saw this at the beginning was, I did a Black grad student women's group on learning from Lemonade, and Beyonce dropped her album. And again, there was the music and there was the movement and there was the food. But so many intergenerational pieces were able to come together and be processed. And I love that, Beyonce showed us all the feelings and that they were all okay, and that there was space for all of them to be big and to be moved through. Films like Fences, and so I just think for myself, the fact that as I'm figuring out how to be an entrepreneur, as I'm figuring out how to be a mom, a partner, all of these different things, that I get to be learning from other Black women while I'm helping other Black women heal is such a big part of it. We, as Yodi said at the beginning, so many times we're trying to change racism or different things by talking to people's brains, and that's not where the change is happening. And so I think for, whether it's in therapy or outside of therapy, we've got to be talking to the whole bodies, talking to all the feelings, and telling the truth about them. And just kind of like we were talking about at the beginning, being willing to not have it all together. Like if I had to not be messy before I went into any of those spaces, I wouldn't have been there and I wouldn't have got the healing that I needed. And so we can be messy, we can know what that feels like in our bodies and learn to move through it together. And I think that's how we support our movement spaces, our institutions, and how we really transform them.
So glad you said that, because this reference to our bodies, Mishelle, and if folks have not picked up Resmaa Menakem's My Grandmother's Hand, it is such a gift to us to understand the ways in which we must heal our bodies from the embodiment of white supremacy. And I am of the belief that all of us as a human family need to heal from that. We experience the oppression in different ways, but if our white brothers and sisters don't see themselves as needing that healing as well, and the work of racial justice only being about helping Black and brown folks, we will only see incremental change. The transformation we need is truly about understanding how we have embodied this insidious system and culture. And so I want to encourage Resmaa Menakem's work. And then the other thing that I think is important, and Quiana, I'm gonna look to you on this, is this idea of how do we not replicate harm? And in some ways, I feel like you and all of you have invited us to hold like the messiness and the truth that we are doing harm, right? But that if we can be mindful, could you guide us a bit, Quiana, in the ways we can think about not replicating it, at least not intentionally? And I love that you offered, I do believe the revolution is in our relationships. And I love that one of the things you talked about was tending to those relationships. And when you said, you're not going to call me out on Facebook, you're going to call me, I felt that, right? That you love me enough, right? To lean into, but that isn't always, like, we don't, also to Yoshimi's point, we have boundaries and we don't owe that to anybody, right? If they harm us. So guide us. And really this is, for all of you, but Quiana, you'd had some powerful thoughts on not replicating harm.
Yeah, so I'll start where it really started for me, and I haven't shared this before, but it's important, is when I decided to be a parent, my co-parent and I were married at the time, and we had a very intentional conversation about what kind of parents we wanted to be. And we were really clear that we didn't want to use physical, for what I'm going to use my language and use an I statement. We didn't want to replicate physical harm. We didn't want to use physical violence as a way to redirect our child's behavior. And we committed to be nonviolent parents. My children are 10 and 12. They've never been hit. They hit each other, which not my favorite thing, but it happens because they're siblings. But they understand nobody else should hit them. It's really interesting. But for me, I didn't want to replicate the childhood I had. I'm not trying to demonize my parents. They did their very best, and their very best included physical reinforcement. My very best doesn't have to, because I know something different. I'm doing something different. So I think it's about being intentional when you have space to be intentional, to decide how you're going to move. And like, not replicating harm for me is small things like how we don't talk about diet culture, how we talk about how all bodies, my kids love my body. I'm a big woman. I am 200 plus pounds. We'll just leave it there. And this is my body. This is the only body I get. I'm working with it. I don't actually need it to be less. I need it to move more. So that's why I do Girl Trek. I don't have weight goals. I don't have food goals. Do you know my kids come jiggle my fat? Like they literally be like, shake it, mama. Like they love my body. And they don't know that this isn't the body. They know that everyone's body is different and everyone's body is good. Hair. Everybody has hair. Everybody has the hair they need, and all hair is good. So it was about re-changing those messages. She's not, my daughters and my son, let's be clear about that, are not getting the same messages about their body that I got. My nickname when I was a kid was Miss Piggy. So I grew up thinking I was fat. And then I look at pictures of me like 8, 9 years old, and I'm like, what was all this fuss? I don't get it. But it's about looking at the things and the systems and the ways that we have to move and not replicating them out of habit. And frankly, sometimes out of laziness. Sometimes it's out of fear, but we have to really look at our patterns. How I talk to people, how I treat people, how I reach out, all of those things. I learned them from a trauma response and I learned them from white supremacy culture. So if I'm still functioning from that place, it's not going to serve me. Like I don't spank my kids, which is my personal choice. And I just decided a long time ago to bring this comment back around full circle. I understand what my ancestors had to do to survive slavery. And if I still have to mimic some of those behaviors or patterns, i.e. beating my kids so that when they go to jail, it's not the same, or when the master beats them, they know what it's like. If I'm still functioning in that level of fear, there's already a problem. I'm not trying to replicate slavery in my current 2020 parenting. That's where some of it started for me. I don't want to replicate harm whenever possible.
Yeah, that's powerful. Thank you. I want to make sure we name that and how we are holding in our bodies generational trauma. And if we are not tending to that, right, then we can replicate it. So thank you for offering.
So as we transition into the wrap up for this time together, I'll just offer the three of you the prompt that we offer at every Centering Justice session, which is to ask you, what would you ask or invite or demand of our community for how we can center racial justice now and into the future that we are manifesting together? And I ask that in the context of this conversation that we've had around these healing practices that you've named. So I'll ask you to speak as you feel called for this part.
I guess I'll go first. So one thing that I wanted to really address as well, since we are a mixed group, is that being able to recognize that we all come from different realities is a very huge part of healing as a community, I believe, and as a whole. Well, not just within yourself, because that can also lead into your relationships and healing relationships around you. But so I'll give a quick example. I have a coworker who he feels as though white men are the most attacked people right now. And I was like, what? And it kind of took everybody back. But then talking with him and just putting my feelings aside for a second, I was able to talk with him and give him examples of how we see things differently. He's like, well, if you're doing everything that a cop says to do, then I don't see why they don't treat you the same. And so I gave him the examples from my life that were, I've had a Black boyfriend and I've had a white boyfriend. Two same things where we've gotten pulled over, very different experiences. We did everything the same with the white boyfriend, let off with a warning. With the Black boyfriend, pulled out of the car, put in handcuffs. And he's like, why? I'm like, because that's our reality. So what I would like our audience today to take away is that people come from different realities. And we have very different mindset, and just to be aware of that. And, you know, with the women of color or people of color on this, I also want to say, like, we all have our roles, and it's okay to be the I don't want to tell white people because it's not my place to tell them, and to stand in that. And that's okay, because there are some of us who will take that, and that we all have our different roles, and that's all right. And I feel as though people often feel attacked, like, oh, you won't tell me why, when I'm trying to just learn. That's not their role. You can find a different person to do that. So I just kind of want to round it out with that. Just understanding we all have different roles, we all have different realities, we all come from different pasts, we all have a whole different line of ancestors behind us. So just recognizing that, and use movement to work through a lot of things. If you can't take an hour dance class or half-hour dance class, put music on for 10 minutes and just feel. Just stand there and feel.
That's great.
So that's my closing comment on that.
Thank you, Yoshimi. Quiana, how about you, Quiana?
Yeah, so I wrote down 3 invitations, and then a little more thought. Spend some time alone, scan your life, maybe just 1 week, and address anywhere where you have lingering discomfort. Be present in your body and your life for a moment and think about, okay, if I'm feeling this in my chest when I think about my boss, is there a way I can maybe I don't want to talk about that thing, but maybe I can just send a note that says, this is a no agenda hello. I do those a lot. I want you to know I'm thinking about you and that you're on my mind, and opening the door, right? We're opening the window. It's like spring cleaning. We open the window to get some fresh air and new energy, new life into the space. And so for me, it's been important to do that in my life about my relationships, to let fresh air in, to let new dialogue in. The second thing is find ways to be in community. Find your lane. A lot of what Yoshimi was saying. Mine happens to be blue. It happens to be faith-centered. Yours could be drumming. One of my friends, Eileen, is on this call, and they are this master drummers. They're a master drummer to me. I don't know what they call them in their work, but just the power that's their community. And I love seeing Eileen's community, but finding your community, find the place where when you're in it, your energy surge, your whole being is excited. Find that place for you. We all have something to give, but we all need to also then create space to get things, to be in a receiving place. So don't just get stuck in giving, also leave room in your spirit for receiving. Find ways to address systemic issues. So be civically engaged, whether it's policy work. My friend Crystal ran for office. She just won the school board. She's gonna be on the school board. But I'm pretty sure she didn't, 20 years ago, I'm pretty sure Crystal wasn't like, I'm gonna be on the Ann Arbor school board. Something happened, something transformed her, something led her to make that choice and to be determined in her belief that she needed to be on the school board, right? She found her lane, she found her community, and she worked within that realm. I think there's a lot of ways to be civically engaged. November 3rd is literally one day. Ballots still need to be counted. Babies still need to be watched. Elders still need care, still need their front walk shoveled. So find a way to be in community that makes sense for you. I consistently try to check my little own personal profile to make sure I'm doing something in self, community, and culture. That there's ways to tap into all of those. And I guess I just wanted to close with, to come back around to the larger healing justice movement and white supremacy. The one way I know how to dismantle white supremacy and white privilege is to heal Black women. If Black women are okay, we're all gonna be okay. If we get free, we taking everybody with us, no matter what you done said or done, you still coming with us. We can talk about it when we get to the other side of the river, but for now, we're gonna get on the other side of the river. And so we are taking so that's the healing area that I focus on as Black women. I hold them up, I support them, I honor, I'm excited to be a Black woman. And we talk about the cup and being empty. And Yodit sometimes talks about white supremacy being the water. And I know that my lane and my role is to be an island, to be a respite for people who are tired of swimming for a moment, who need to catch their breath, who need a handheld, who need a hug, who need a moment to be like, this is hard. I want to be the island in the white supremacist sea where people can just step back for a moment and get back to their fullest, most authentic self so that they can go back out in the water and swim. I just want to thank Yodit and Ananya and Mishelle and Yoshimi for being here. I want to thank all of you for being here and giving us space to talk about something that's delicate and tender. It's not one thing, it is many things. And so we need many voices and many approaches to heal. And so thank you all for being here.
Okay, I think for me, one thing I want to share, and I actually got this from the Untold Stories group on Sunday. One of the women shared that, you know, we have to name that we're okay. Like here in this moment, we're okay. And often I think we're thinking about, and sometimes I have to name that I may not feel safe in general in the world, but like right here, right now, I am, and I gotta feel that in my body. You know, and if I'm thinking about something that, you know, I'm not this enough or I'm not that enough, or like with this body, with this hair, with this personality, that this is who I am right now and I'm okay. And that mantra, I got that just on Sunday has really meant a lot to me. It's been a really important reminder to not just say again, but like to breathe into and to get down into my body and into my bones. The thing I think I would say for systems, whether they're organizing groups or nonprofits or social services or mental health professionals like we're out here, or our anti-racist and DEI trainings, we're out here trying to do good, but I think we have to continue. All of us have our best practices, and I think we've got to continue to examine them and ask ourselves, how are they centering BIPOC wisdom, and how are we continually taking out of them the harmful ways of white supremacy? And that has to be like a constant investigation. And if there aren't BIPOC people and women in the room and thought leaders and people who were sitting at their feet, then we're not doing it right. Like we have to be able to, in mental health, we often talk about evidence-based practices, and which means that like something like mindfulness, which is really an indigenous practice, doesn't get validated until it gets funded research and all of this stuff by people. And I think we have to shift to community informed, community validated practices, like what really works. Like, and we've got to be learning that from people who have been doing that work. And I think the other thing is just getting out of the way of the communities themselves. You know, that like let's bring in all of the healers, of which all of us play a part. And like I was saying, like find our lane, because there's enough work for all of us. And if we are all doing it, then there's not too much, and we don't have to get in that mindset that we have to do it all. So just I would say to not be territorial, you know, to just we need all of us. And I think the last thing is just, especially in movement and organizing spaces, to really be trauma informed and aware, to know what it feels like when we're getting triggered and when we're getting activated, and to know what we need in those moments, you know, before, during, and after movements, like and actions. How do we ground? How do we get back in our bodies when systems are playing us against each other, or we believe that we're diametrically opposed? Like, how do we step back from that and get back into our bodies and back into our connectedness so that we can hear each other and be with each other again? Because when we are fatigued, when we are triggered, it's hard to bridge those gaps, but they are bridgeable. And so we've got to be moving from that space and never losing sight of that.
Thank you, Mishelle. And Qiana and Yoshimi. I think Yodit had one more thing she wanted to add. No?
Yeah, I'm gonna put it in chat instead. But I have become recently inspired by Ruth King's work. She's Black and identifies as a Buddhist. And so just wanted to offer, I just found she has a piece on equanimity and a mantra around that I've been holding. So I dropped it in the chat.
Yeah. So what we'll do is sometimes it's helpful to have these demands in writing or to see them in a different way. So we'll share these back with you in a follow-up. But for these last 9 or 10 minutes that we have together, we would be really interested, for those who are able to stay and would like to, if you have questions, to please ask them. And you can come off of mute and ask your questions that way. People are expressing a lot of gratitude. And if you may have, oh, did you want to say something, Qiana?
Yeah, I was just going to say, do folks have other examples of healing they maybe want to share or work that they've done? Because that's always important. We're a collective, and other folks might have, I was just curious if other folks had things that they do for healing that resonate for them and they want to share. Is that okay, Ananya?
Yeah.
I actually would like to share a healing that has worked for me, and it's called, I know you all talked about meditation a little bit and it not being for everybody, but truly for me, there's different types of meditation, which is true. But if you've ever heard of sleep-based meditation, it has changed my life, honestly, and I believe it can change many other people's lives. And it's just getting to a space where there's no time and it's just, I don't know how to explain it because it's something you feel and it's life-changing. And basically what it is like you follow a guided meditation and you are, or you don't have to follow a guided meditation, but this is how I do it. I follow a guided meditation on YouTube and I just lay down like you're going to sleep. So you're not like sitting up, you're just laying down, and you get to the in-between state of before you fall asleep and sleep. So into that state you are there. And I think that it's true, and that's where you get your subconscious, where you meet your subconscious and you're able to kind of rewire some of those thinking or bad habits or patterns that you had. That's how people, go into trance and quit cigarette smoking and stuff like that. So I think that for me has been really, really helpful. And for anyone who's interested, it's just called sleep-based meditation.
Thank you for sharing that.
Can I talk off of that, speak off of that just a little bit? Thank you for that, Sunana. I forgot to talk about, or just want to add a little thing in, especially as we're healing, is to be grateful for our bodies. So especially in the morning, sometimes what I'll do, before I even get up and when I'm just laying there, I will just touch and massage my upper arms and my shoulders and just say thank you. And then especially with my feet and my legs, thank you for carrying me. Thank you for just moving around, and for my hair for protecting me, and my eyebrows for protecting my eyes from the sun, and just kind of going through and just thanking those different parts of my bodies, because we forget that they do so much for us. And so it's not just an inner thing, but just outer too. And it, you can feel it through the day too, I believe. So I totally forgot about that, but I feel like it's a important, and it's a really practical way to have gratitude. Going into life with gratitude is a very big thing for me, to just be able to be a whole person and being thankful for what I have around me. So yeah, I just wanted to pop that one back in there.
Thank you, Yoshimi.
I have to transition to a call. I want to thank Mishelle and Yoshimi and Qiana And I want to invite those of us who are in organizations, just a few other things that Ananya, as she modeled at the start of the call, and that we've been learning alongside other healers is, if you've got a meeting that's scheduled for an hour, and recognizing that so many of us are jumping from one meeting to the next, can the meeting be 50 minutes instead of 60? So folks have a moment to breathe in between. Breathing, actually coming into the space, and allowing folks to get centered and to catch their breath and to become more mindful in the moment. We use breathing also as a practice to sense and feel our bodies and what's going on for us. We're holding a lot and processing a lot in these meetings and being stimulated in different ways in the electronic space. Music sometimes, and not just music, but like this Monday, we have a regular Monday huddle, as I'm sure many of you do. And we just looked at like a puppy video, just something to kind of break up the very cerebral talk-based, piece that's happening on Zoom and that we're missing by being in physical space together. Also, if you have animals or children or a teddy bear, I mean, I know some of us are in our space by ourselves, just there, and people with far more experience than me can say what the science is about this, but like I grabbed my kid today and we just squoze each other deeply because it releases endorphins and serotonin and things like that. So even though we might be going a little stir crazy with the folks we've been stuck in the house with since March, grab them up and touch them. Touch is so important right now. And I know for me, for people who like to touch, some of y'all are like, I don't want nobody to touch me. I am missing a deep hug. I'm missing, that way I would embrace my friends and, sit with them. So I just wanted to offer a few of those practical things as organizational leaders. Guided meditation. We've done centering meditations at the office, right? And these were all things that frankly were in my, in my mind or in my heart or even in my practice, but I was afraid early on to bring those because people might feel some kind of way, but mostly the response has been really powerful. And so I encourage you, if it's something new or you want to try it on, it was a lot of our staff that helped to contribute to the ideas and the tools and practices we're now using. So just wanted to offer that, and my deep, deep, deep gratitude to my sisters, Yoshimi and Mishelle and Kiana and Ananya, and even Will is here somewhere holding it down in the background. He gave over the mic today, and we're grateful for that. I hope you all continue to be well and that we will transform our communities together through healing, collective and individual. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And I just, before anyone else wants to jump in, I added the survey link to the chat box. So if you wouldn't mind telling us how you experienced this session today before you go, that will really help us prepare for the next one. But we do have 1 more minute left in case anyone is holding something that they really would like to share. Beverly, yeah, go ahead.
This is not a 1 minute kind of question or comment, but I was going back in my head thinking about how an institution, a community, a system engages BIPOC wisdom and knowledge without engaging some of the harm that has occurred in that process. What are the mechanisms that are used to access that? Because that can go wrong in a minute, right? There's a lot of harm that can happen particularly as white-centered groups try to, with best intentions, try to engage that process and getting those voices, getting that knowledge, getting that wisdom centered in the work. It's not an easy thing. So I was wondering if anyone had any ideas, I mean, in very practical terms, about how to facilitate that process without doing harm.
I feel like recognizing is a huge part of that. I've been in many spaces where I've seen indigenous practices in an all white space and it not being recognized at all. So I feel like for one of the main points of what I'm trying to say is that where those practices come from and those teachings and the wisdom come from need to be recognized. And the people who started it need to be honored. And so I feel like that's a place to start. There's much more to that conversation, as you said, but as a starting off point, they do need to be recognized because oftentimes in a lot of these spaces, they aren't.
Yeah, a couple of quick things that just come to mind for me. I think often institutions need to look outside of themselves and pay people for their labor. I know when I worked in institutions, I think consent gets funny because do I really do I have a choice about saying yes or no? And also where is going to be the backlash on me if I really speak truth? Whereas now that I'm outside of an agency, I get to choose if I take the job or not, if it's value aligned or not. There's so many more degrees of freedom. So I think that is one piece of it. And also that one of the things I determine when people call me is this ongoing work or is this a one and done thing? Because that's not really going to be effective. So is it an ongoing commitment?
We're at time, so I'll find a way to have that conversation with you, Beverly. But it's a good question, and I appreciate you asking it.
Thank you, Beverly, and thank you, Quiana and Mishelle and Yoshimi. I forgot to check in with my body through this hour and a half, but I'm doing that now and feel so much appreciation for what each of you and what all of you in being here have offered. So thank you and have a wonderful rest of your days.